Hello and welcome to the August 14th edition of the Gold, Goats, and Guns Short News. I'm Tom Luongo. It is time to talk about Contagion. So, yesterday I did an interview with Sputnik Radio, the mothership actually, not Lee and Garland's fault lines, but the mothership over in Moscow, asking me about my article from the other day about the contagion from the Turkish lira debacle crossing the Mediterranean. And it's funny, we had max insanity on Friday, right? Everybody was screaming that the Turks need to do something, that they need to ask the IMF for a bailout, they need to put on capital controls, they need to do this, they need to do that. And again, as I said then and I'll say now, these are all people talking their book. These are all people talking how they want the Turks to knuckle under to the pressure that the United States is putting on them. No one is denying, including myself, that Turkey doesn't have structural problems. That point may have been lost the last time I talked about this. I understand that Turkey's problems are structural. I understand that they're running a massive current account deficit. I understand that they have $222 billion or so of non-bank dollar-denominated corporate debt that is currently imploding all over the place. I don't doubt any of that. But as I always say, when you owe the bank $1,000, it's your problem. And when you owe the bank $222 billion, it's the bank's problem. And you can never, ever forget that at a certain level, when you are a massive debtor, you have leverage. Okay? And if Turkey doesn't ask the IMF for a bailout, then the money that's supposed to go to the banks that own these bonds, these toxic dying bonds, can't be distributed. That's what the IMF is for. The IMF is nothing but a money laundering operation from taxpayers through it to bail out the banks who've made bad bets based on ridiculous monetary policy. Nobody on Wall Street understood the dynamic that during the last 10 years of zero-bound interest rates and the Turks' deficit spending to support an operation in Syria to atomize that country and take it over, and President Erdogan's neo-Ottoman dreams of expanding Turkey's territory into northern Syria wasn't going to end this way, that they didn't understand that this was a one-way bet ultimately, because at the end of the day, they knew that the policy of the Fed would eventually have to be reversed, and that would put upward pressure on Turkey, and they could see this coming, and they just continued to pile on, buying more and more of this. Now, once American policy against Turkey shifts, they know exactly when to get out of the trade. Or do they? See, everybody's always thinking linearly in markets. They're not thinking cyclically in markets. They don't think in terms of, they think that whatever trade's going on, whatever relationship exists between the U.S. and Turkey is going to exist in perpetuity. This is why understanding geopolitics and how geopolitics and policy affect and interact with markets is so very powerful and so very important. It's why I do what I do here at Gold, Goats, and Guns. Because so many people who are bank managers, hedge fund managers, money guys, they all think they're invincible because they have the government on their side, or they have inside information that they trade on. But then once policy changes, and once somebody does something that they're not supposed to do, in this case, the Turkish president refusing to knuckle under to U.S. financial pressure, now they're caught short. Now they're caught naked. Now what? Well, now they need to be bailed out. And that's what's going on here. That's the problem. Everybody is worried about their book, and Turkey understands that they have leverage. Erdogan is not an idiot. One does not gain and maintain power the way he has if he's a moron. And yet, so many people argue and discuss these situations as if they're smarter than him. I don't believe that. I fundamentally don't believe that. I believe that everybody is pretty frickin' smart if uninformed. And the problem, of course, is always the question of being uninformed. when I analyze the people who are operating at the high strategic levels of this fight, and I see what their incentives are, what Turkey's doing makes perfect sense to me. What Russia's doing makes perfect sense to me. What the United States oligarchy and the European oligarchy are doing makes perfect sense to me. So everybody is using their comparative advantage. And they're running their strategic play. The question is, who's going to win? As I said in my interview yesterday with Sputnik, the Russians just dumped, apparently, most of their U.S. Treasury holdings. Now, the official TIC statistics, the Treasury International Capital statistics, say they dumped $85 billion over 2 months. There's an article on Zero Hedge yesterday from probably the Council on Foreign Relations explaining that possibly as much as half of that $85 billion is actually sitting in Euroclear in Belgium and in offshore bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. Doesn't matter. All the Russians did with that, this actually, if you really stop to think about it, this is actually worse because the Russians haven't completely shot their wad. They're sitting with another $35 or $40 billion worth of U.S. Treasury bonds in very liquid positions at Euroclear and in Cayman Islands banks, moving that stuff offshore so that they can dump them at a moment's notice into deep and liquid markets, as opposed to being held behind the U.S. Russian sanctions wall. And I wonder where that money's going to go. Because as I said to the woman yesterday on Sputnik, hey, I'm sitting here, I'm Vladimir Putin, and I want to cleave Turkey away from NATO. How much is it worth to me to bail out, to help bail out the Turkish concrete and steel companies, right? Their electronics companies, their pipeline companies, to ensure that Turkstream gets built, that the nuclear power plants that the Russians are building for the Turks are getting built. Remember, that's all done with local contractors. I mean, you know, Gazprom might have the contract for building Turkstream, but Gazprom doesn't send their dudes out there to lay the pipe. They hire local contractors to lay the concrete footers, to build the pipe, and all of that stuff. So those guys, those guys are all going to be local contractors in Turkey. Are you kidding? And that's the key. So how much is that worth to Putin? Think it's worth $20 billion? $30 billion? I do. As a matter of fact, I think those guys can all get bailed out, while the ones that BBVA in Spain or Unicredit in Italy or BNP Paribas in France, they're going to be left holding the bag. And that's going to be fun. So if you watch the markets today, if you look at what's happening in the markets today, you can see safe haven flows everywhere. Zero Hedge has got a great article up this morning saying, look, the Euro Swiss franc pair is down hard. This is a classic safe haven flow indicator. Copper is down hard. Gold is down hard. Cryptos are down hard. Everything is down hard. Over the last week, the U.S. 10-year is down 10 basis points, 12 basis points. The Dow is going to do well here because people are looking for a place to put their money, worried more about the return of their money than the return on it. Because that's what happens in a crisis. And we're at the beginnings of it now. Okay, that's what I've got here for this morning. This has been the Gold, Goats, and Guns short news. If you like what you heard today, you can give a like and subscribe down below. That would be great. If you do subscribe, I do live streams on Monday nights at 8 and Friday nights at 9. So if you click the little bell to get notifications, you'll get notified as to when I go live, and we can interact directly during those live streams. All right? You guys take care. You have a great afternoon. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.